don't know what it is because it's not the recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. We seem to hear the echoing stronger than whatever you say, so it's definitely better for Angela's level. But it's not, I'm pretty sure it's not better. It might just be that when you're not speaking, Angela.
All right. All right. Well, welcome to the meeting. And this week was, I guess, pretty busy. Jesse came back from England, and I was busy just, I don't know, recovering from the last couple weeks. And, of course, this next week we have the
big event.
Yeah, big event. So, yeah, well, we'll get to that in a little bit. So, first of all, is there anything that people need to talk about or want to bring up before we start? Angela, Jesse?
Oh, did you say something, Angela?
Yeah, I don't know why that. Oh.
I couldn't tell if you said anything, but I think
I don't know.
It was a no.
Yeah, it was really low. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with her connection, but
yeah, the voice seems very distant. Anyway, as far as my updates, to be very honest, I felt I still might try to get a COVID test, but I was exhausted. I couldn't really have any creative energy or do anything at the bare minimum until Thursday. And then Friday, and then yesterday I woke up and I felt pretty much normal, which is nice, but it's been like it's been a lot. Oh, I think Erin's here. Erin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad you're here. But yeah, I was just giving you an update and saying how I was exhausted all week, and this is, in a lot of ways, this is the first weekend in kind of like almost 10 weeks where I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to make any. I have to make plans to go to Boston, but it's just nice to have like I'm literally planning to just work on our presentation most of today and tomorrow. So that'll be great.
Good.
And I haven't had time to do that for a long time, so that's great to see everybody here for that sense too. But and I guess the only news I have is I'm moving to Boston next Sunday.
Okay, good. Oh wow, good. That's good.
I think that's Avery that joined us.
Oh, it is Avery. Hello.
Hello. Hey.
Good. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's good. Angela's still there. I don't know, her connection is kind of rough, but I think we'll make it. So,
did you guys, Erin, we were doing just general updates. Did Erin or Avery want to say anything?
I came out last week, which was nice.
yeah, I heard. Congratulations.
Thank you. Besides that, I'm still down for the presentation, looking into papers and summaries for a broad overview of different interesting
Yeah, that's good.
components of Cogstack.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a nice event. We've got, like, I don't know, 12 or 13 people signed up, maybe more than that now. And we're trying to advertise it on Twitter. We sent out a couple tweets this week, and we'll just, I don't know, I think people will get to the event through the conference portal, which is underline.io, or they'll be able to get to it through a link if we want to give them a link. So that, people can join from in both ways. Okay. And so, Avery, if you haven't signed up, have you signed up for CogSci, the conference yet, or?
I think I forgot to do that.
Oh, well, I think there's a complimentary pass. I mean, it doesn't really matter because it's free, so you can just sign up whenever before the event. And Jesse, if you could make sure that the link gets sent, or I don't know where it is. Maybe I'll just do it.
Yeah, I'll do that too.
Yeah. But it's just a matter of, I don't know if you have to sign up, because again, I have access to the portal and we have the free link, so it's not a huge problem. But in any case, so yeah, we got like 3 complimentary passes for the conference. So anyways, yeah, let's go to the Slack review. And everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is our Slack. Again, we haven't had a lot of activity this week, but what we had, it was, I think, pretty good. We had this. This is a picture of the underline.io interface. It's, all these virtual conferences, they have a portal, and you go through and you can look at the schedule for different events. So our event is Wednesday, July 28th, 2200 CEST, which is the time in Germany, which Angela knows. And this translates to about 4 p.m., I think 4 p.m. Eastern time, and about 9 p.m. British time, and about 10 p.m. in Germany. So that's the time frame we're looking at in the late afternoon to evening in Europe and North America. And then, India and East Asia, it's going to be in the middle of the night for them. But I think this will be a good time. At least I'll record it, and we'll do our thing in the event room, and then we can have it available later for people to see. So that sounds like it sounds like it'll be a pretty decent turnout, like I said before, and I think we can, get some good stuff. We'll see what we have. And I told Jesse last night that you just have to kind of plan around things. So if you don't know exactly what the timing is for things, people, if whether they present or not, I know he made a couple of inquiries to people, but we'll just see what happens, and you'll have to have things, maybe like some backup content. If you have, if people don't show up, or if the conversation kind of dies down, you'll just have to have things ready to go, and you can bring up different questions or have different things to present. And so that should program the whole thing. It's not very long. It's like 90 minutes, but we'll be able to do it, I think, pretty effectively. Okay, yeah, and we'll advertise more this week coming up. I haven't gone on the LinkedIn account yet, but we can do that. And then I want to send out a mailing list. I already started a mailing list with people's emails, and I'm going to just send out some messages, orientation, like how to get into the meeting, what the link is. Maybe if you want to prepare an agenda for it, like, Jesse and Avery could come up with an agenda where we plan out, tentative things that are going to be featured, and then I can send it out to everyone, and it'll give some anticipation for it. So I think that's stuff we can work on this week. I think of some other things we need to talk about here. I think DevAI had a couple of things. Okay. So the first one is this paper, Finding Out About Filling In. This was something that came out of this Grossbergian Neuroscience. I think we covered that 2 weeks ago. So this was Stephen Grossberg, who I think was Johann's advisor when he was doing his PhD at Boston University, and he had a bunch of different papers that we talked about. This is one of them, Finding Out About Filling In. This was a lot about visual perception. This is actually more of a philosophy of it. And then this paper, A Fast Link Between Face Perception and Memory and the Temporal Pole, which is something Jesse found. Is there something you wanted to say about either of those, Jesse? Or
can you say that again? I was distracted.
Oh, so these are just the two papers you put in the DevAI channel.
You know, I haven't got to look at the papers specifically, but they came up. They came up at a really interesting talk with. I didn't, I checked out Johann's group, but I didn't get to like. Yeah, I don't. Sorry, I had another message here. I don't think I put many things in. I could talk a little bit about Johann stuff this week, but I don't know if we want to do that now. But
we could, yeah.
Let me see if I can easily find. Let me quickly see if I can pull up some of the screenshots, because there's a really interesting topic this week. But it's a bit. I want to try this. I think this could work. I'm going to share my screen. Yes. Okay, you can see. Can you see this in terms of like what's going on?
Yeah, I can see it.
Right. All right, so I came in late to Johann's stuff. I'll just quickly go through the slides because it was quite interesting. One of the main things this week was about boundaries. I forget the theme of this week. There's a third chapter in the Grossberg book. And, for those who don't know, I can't pull them up easily right now, but these were all recorded, and I think Johann's gonna make them available on his YouTube page soon. And I really recommend seeing. I didn't see last week's because I was in the midst of London and everything. But the first one was quite good to give an overview, and I might go back to that in terms of. It does a nice outline of some developments and trajectories in the background part of it. And that was the first week. I missed the second week. The third week was this one, and it has a lot to do with boundaries. And there's interesting stuff here about perception, and there's a lot of interesting things that kind of fit, like giving information and movement versus other information. And so that's kind of what this week was about. And I did not see all of it, but I came in kind of like, I don't know, 30 minutes in or something. That's weird. Right. Okay. What else do we have here? Boundaries are important. There's a lot of reasons talking about boundaries. This is really cool. This is a bit philosophical, but I like Johann because he's pretty versed in Cajun chicken sandwiches. He's pretty versed in like philosophy and everything else. And there was a really good discussion, and I think this is the last functional slide that I have. Um, but there's a lot of interesting talk about debates between Grossberg and other people and contemporary views on boundaries and where the boundaries are and what the boundaries mean and how they're perceived. And it kind of goes like back to this like Trajectories, which is a very classical, philosophical, sort of spiritual text. And just there's a lot of good discussion about that. I don't really have a lot of things prepared to say about it, other than I think I might go back and look at especially the first one, in preparation for our upcoming event, and the week 3 one, which I have a couple slides of, was what we're really interested to think about in terms of any of our papers more context of the information and direct perception and affordances. So just a little preview of that, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. I'm glad we're kind of revisiting that topic, because I put it aside for a while, and so maybe after we're done with the event here, we can get into that a little bit more deeply. But yeah, I think there's a lot to say about that. I don't know if we have any papers on. I think there might be some things in my papers queue that might be relevant to that, but we'll see. I can't remember. So let me share my screen again. All right. So that was the DevAI channel. I don't think there's anything in ethics, tech, and society. Event discussion. That's from last week. Don't see anything there. The general channel. So this is our advertisement from Twitter here. They made a little poster for us. Discussion group Trajectories and Cognitive Science. And we have, let me go to the Medium post. So I created a Medium post while sort of from our recent conferences. So this just recaps, I think, 4 presentations that were made over June and July. So it doesn't include the event at the HCI conference, and it's not including the one that's coming up, but just everything in between, which is, I know it seems like, well, that can't be that much, but so we have the Cultural Evolution Society Conference, the Inverse Generative Social Science Workshop, the Cognitive Offloading Conference, and then this event at Networks 2021 in the Net Open Satellite session. And so this was, all these lectures, I think, except for this one, are pre-recorded, so they're on the lectures channel on YouTube. And then this Net Open one is on Figshare. And I think they're going to have the recording out at some point. We'll see if that's going to be publicly available. So this is the first one, Cultural Evolution Society, is kind of like highlights some of what was going on there. I didn't really talk too much about the conference, just kind of like highlighting some of the content. The Inverse Generative Social Science Workshop, this is a screenshot that they took of me presenting the talk in that session. This one wasn't pre-recorded, so this one is actually just available on Figshare. I might make a version of this for the YouTube channel, but we'll see. This one, the Networks 2021 one, was available on YouTube, so that's the one from NetOpen. This includes data from the lab here, the Open Room Foundation, and the Rockwire community. So I have analyses from each group that I'm using as examples, and I've also used some data from the Wikimedia Wikipedia Foundation to sort of augment some of this stuff. So it was a really nice talk. Talks a lot about like strategies for building these kind of communities, and how you can represent the membership and their activities as a network. So there's a lot of there isn't a lot of high level network science in it, but it's just it kind of gives people an idea. So, and then this is the cognitive offloading talk. This was Angela, Jesse, and myself. And a developmental model for intelligence offloading. So these are some screenshots of the slides here. We talked about offloading as an intelligent embodied system, and then the developmental learning of celestial navigation, which was a slide here. And that was this post. So, I'm trying to keep up the medium, and hopefully, we'll have some more stuff up there later this summer. Just recapping some of our activities. I think that's important to kind of go through the activities and recap where you've been, especially if you're doing a lot of things kind of like in the now and you don't realize like what you've done. If you get to the end of a period of time, like the end of the summer, and you look back and you forget like half of the things you did. But if you make a little log like that, I think it's easy to see where you've been, and you can reflect on it, I think, more effectively. So, okay.
I really appreciate that. I mean, it's a great thing to do, and there's been so much stuff, and especially because my last 2 months have been just, a mess. It's great to see that and to see what's going on in the lab, and so people understand too. And not, again, like Zura, I think Zura was here last time I was here. Just all the people that are sort of, not everybody's in the lab that comes to the meetings, so just having a place to show that kind of an update is really helpful. So thank you for putting it together.
Yeah, no problem. Zero was here last week, and we were talking about a lot of different things. So he was interested in, a lot of what was going on. So hopefully, maybe we can reach out to him more. Let me go back to the screen share. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add before we move on?
I did find a couple more slides from Johan's thing.
Okay.
We don't have to talk about them, but I might share them really quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have time. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Whoops, hold on. Let's get this up here. Don't really like how this works. Let's do it. Alright. I'm just used to the Mac. My Mac computer here does like the way you scroll through some of the stuff isn't quite as good as it was in some other things. Anyway, there's a really interesting discussion taking place here, and this is a comparison to depiction. There's a lot of interesting talk about art and boundaries and the way it was sorted out. Like this. I don't know if the impressionist thing or not. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting talk about edges. I'll just focus on that for my talk here. But why do we draw edges that don't exist? In terms of like this here, there's an edge here, there's edges that kind of here, or like edges that are sort of frame things in particular ways. And even like impressionists, the impressionists aren't drawing shapes, they're drawing these sort of things that become shapes when you look at them in particular ways, giving an impression of something. And there's an interesting discussion about how the brain, there's some really great commentary about how our mind and what really high-level art is doing, and was experimenting with at the time, because how our eyes and our mind interpret edges and boundaries. There's a really interesting discussion about that, and I'll refer you to the recording. But even here, it's sort of kind of like that thing with the fancy name about finding faces and stuff. I don't remember the name of it. You just see a face.
Peridolia.
Yeah. And it's kind of like what are the boundaries of that with other shapes that we see and kind of impose shapes into. And there's a lot of interesting talk about that and colors here as well. the distorting effects of visibly drawn contours, boundaries versus different things that go on, how this all plays with what's doing in our parts of our mind. And there's interesting talk about how certain I don't remember the words for it, but like certain parts of your brain will keep information indefinitely until they're cleaned out, and some will only keep it as long as is necessary. And they had a very interesting discussion about that. And you know, this is a talk about commentary on Monet and the art of seeing. The untrained eye is fooled to think that he seems formed by the model edges, not with color. Fools the eye into seeing form without edges, you know, and it's sort of like a lot of interesting stuff here. Let me come out of this and go back into, and then I'll close with this row of stuff. This is not going to work. What's happening here? This is so confusing because okay, here we go. But again, just more thinking about lines and contrast here, and these different kinds of differentiating. Like here's some very clear lines here. Here's more of the impressionist boundary line stuff, and again here more examples of that. Blurred boundaries versus just color differences versus sharp lines. And then, you know, there's a really interesting comparison between like this is like Rin Tin Tin and this classic, you know, Japanese paint. I think it's originally wood carving or something. But let's do this. Here we go. This figure, and I'll leave on this, but this figure was brought up in the Paul Kaisik talk a while ago. And there was a really interesting discussion about these types of paintings and the way edges are formed. Like here, there's very clear edges, and there's no like shading or coloration here. It's just lines. Whereas like in the other impressionist paintings, there are much more the colors themselves and the shading with the edges. And there's interesting talk about how attention and which part of the brain is setting certain rules or behaviors, and what's feeding forward, what's looping back, and what's not. There's really a discussion about all of that. And I think this might be interesting to consider in a lot of our layered approaches to, meta-brain models and perception and the way things might be weighted in I don't really want to say neural networks in the biological or artificial sense, but in those things, yes. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, that's fascinating stuff. Yeah, I like this model here. I'm kind of intrigued by it. Anything with arrows on it, I'm intrigued by. But I think this is interesting because it's, how does information move through the brain? How does it? Of course, we've talked about the cybernetic sort of approaches where you have feedback, where you have, other types of mechanisms for circularity and for regulation. So this is really interesting.
Yeah, and this I don't have the just as a quick bit of background for those who don't know Johan or this group and what they're talking about. Johan is a researcher at Boston University, and Boston used to have a program called Cognitive and Neural Systems. I was really into it, but it doesn't exist anymore. A lot of the people here, I think Foley, Catholic, and some others in the group, are kind of reuniting to go through Stephen Grossberg's book. And Grossberg kind of founded the CNS Cognitive and Neural Systems department. And so Grossberg recently released this book, and they're kind of going through it based on what they know about Grossberg, and as all smart, active researchers and so on and so forth. So it's a really fascinating thing to be a part of. Like I said, I really recommend following up on those. There tend to be about 90 minutes or so every week at 9 o'clock. But they are recorded, and I think they'll be quite fruitful for a lot of things we want to talk about. And I really like it because Johan's quite based on physics and biology, which is maybe a little bit different in this group at times. But obviously, Bradly's versed in that, and our other group, the D-Worm stuff, is very versed in that. And Johan's really good about philosophy and art and very inquisitive, so it's a cool thing to be a part of. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. That's all for me about that.
Yeah.
Just got staring at my screen and not letting me move.
Yeah, sometimes they freeze up. Yeah, Avery mentioned Peridolia, which is interesting because we've talked about that in my other group about how that's a thing that people are interested in machine learning and in deep learning. And sometimes you apply, say, like a deep learning algorithm to a data set, and it will see things in like patterns and things that don't necessarily exist. So the idea is that you have this pattern that emerges from, just a swirl of lines or, patterns in whatever it is you're looking at, and they kind of emerge as a sort of gestalt. And so people have looked at that in terms of, or they haven't, I don't know if they've looked at it, they've observed it in machine learning and in deep learning. So various types of networks will, identify patterns in objects or shapes that don't really exist. If you were to label the objects, label the images, they don't exist in those labels, but they pull them out nonetheless. And so it's interesting, and it's hard to say whether it's doing exactly what the brain is doing, but it's interesting that that's possible. So there's probably a lot in that area to investigate, but I don't know exactly how you'd go about it. So just a point there. Let me go to the chat before we move on with the rest of the... Okay, so yeah, we're just going to have like our mailing list, and you don't have to be on it. It's just for people who are signing up through the conference portal mainly. So we definitely, though, want to make sure that people are, comfortable sharing, at the event. And so I want to make it, give people multiple ways in which they can contribute or they can join in. So if you have any concerns about that, let us know. If you want to contribute but you don't want to be on camera, that's fine. If you want to contribute offline, if you want to send in some words before we do our event, we can arrange for that. If you want to pre-record something, or we can figure that out. So let's see. Let me go back to the Slack here. So that's in the general channel. Hackathons, no. Information theory. I don't think there was much more. I think there was something in virtual reality. Okay. Yeah, there are a couple things. Like last week we talked about Steve Mann, and I put this in the virtual reality Slack. This is the guy who, I guess he's still a professor at the University of Toronto. He's in the computer science department. And this was before Google, well before Google Glass, actually. He made his own monocle, and the monocle had a little camera on it, and it allowed him to view things in augmented reality. And so one of the things he did was something like what Angela does, which is life logging, where you have a camera and you follow your life, around, and you record everything. And apparently at one point he did this, and he went into a McDonald's, and they kicked him out of the McDonald's because they didn't know what he was doing. They thought that he was some sort of spy, corporate spy or something, so they kicked him out. And he does a lot of stuff with augmented reality. So that's an interesting, I think, cultural sort of curiosity about the technology. Then Adam Savage, I think this week, posted something on. So he's very into Oculus VR, and he does this where he puts up content on his. So Adam Savage is from the Mythbusters, and he did a bunch of. He's doing a bunch of things where they're creating content for the Oculus headset, and he's doing also some life logging in this way too. So this is a nice post if you want to check that out. And so that's it. I think that's all we have for the Slack this week. So let's move on to... So I guess Neuromatch wrapped up this last week. And I know this year we haven't really put too much effort into it.
Did we cover the ethics update in the Slack? I don't know if you did.
Well, okay, why don't we do the ethics update? I don't think there's anything in the Slack channel, though.
There wasn't that much, but there were a couple things I did want to mention.
Okay.
Just for people, because I know people are interested in that. Can I do this here? Whatever. You have it up. Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
So for those who may recall, the AI Ethics Now, the AI Now Lexicon project was something we were going to actually submit to a while ago. And for those who are interested in, I really encourage people who are interested in the ethics team in general to check out what they're doing. The AI Now project is kind of someone who left. I believe it's Google or Facebook ex-ethics team members who founded it. So they're trying to be progressive about what they're doing in AI ethics. So I just encourage people to kind of check that out. And as things are finally settling down for me, I've done zero stuff with the ethics team for basically 2 months. This is what the real talk is about it. But I have a lot of things I want to be doing with that, especially once I'm settled in Boston, and hopefully can this is a discussion to have sort of later. But I want to kind of recruit some people in Boston because I know there's going to be a really big market that I can see in person there. So I want to get some people who want to do stuff with that. And we already have a great group of people here. And I think there's a lot we can do if we have a lot of interesting people looking at stuff. So just putting that out there, that we're on a bit of a summer vacation with that right now, but it won't be too long before that comes back around. And I don't know anything about this thing, but I know about the world's first ethical AI certification maturity model. But I found I actually found a lot of interesting stuff, ironically, on Instagram about this recently, about people. There's a very small community about talking about AI ethics on Instagram, but we'll see where that comes from that. But I wanted to mention the AI Now project and encourage again those who are interested in these things to keep an eye towards fleshing out projects. I know I haven't really been at the steering wheel lately, but there'll be a lot to do in the upcoming future. So think about that and put ideas or things you want to do, whether it's directly or if you want to work on data aspects of things or projects that you want to collaborate with others about. We have a lot of options for that. So that's my plug for the ethics team. That's it for me.
Okay. Well, that sounds great. Thanks for the update. We haven't talked about that in a while, so I think it's worth revisiting or at least refreshing our memories on what was going on there. Maybe this fall we'll start. Well, of course, we want to have this joint event with Rockwire. We also want to. I don't really have any updates on that. It's just that we're probably going to aim for the fall because I think people are, over the summer it's hard to get people involved in going.
I feel like I have everything's television right now, and it's the 28th is 4 days away, so we have to wrap up everything we can about the cognition futures, trajectories, and connection stuff. We need to finish that up this weekend as much as we can.
Right.
And that's what I'm going to be doing. So if anybody, I'll say this again later, but if anybody has anything they want to talk about regarding that this weekend, I'll be around. I'm not going anywhere, doing anything for the first time in 10 weeks, so I'll be around. But let's move on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then, if you're interested in, I'm glad that you're kind of recruiting sort of Boston locally. That's good. We can tap
That's-
into that area.
That's
Yeah.
part of the master plan to spread the good word of orthogonal research and education lab to the masses.
Yeah.
And the thousands of, oh my god, side note, Boston housing market is tough, and I'm very lucky. I'm #blessed to find a place before the descending of the swarm of students that are coming in. So we can use that to find wonderful people to join us, but that's all I'll say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get back to the screen share here, and so that's all we had for the Slack. Wanted to move on to the NeuroMatch Academy. So this year we didn't really do much. I think we talked about this last week with Zura. Zura actually was a student this year in the computational neuroscience part. So actually there are two schools this year. There's the computational neuroscience school, which happened this past 3 weeks. And then there's the deep learning school, which is happening, I think, in the next 2 weeks sometime. I don't know when it actually starts, but it's coming up.
I think it starts later in August.
Okay. So, the point is that there's a lot of stuff that's kind of moving forward very fast, and we weren't as tuned into it this year. But we still have this repository, and it's a little dated, from 2020. So this was when we had a lot of people coming through the lab who were interested in NeuroMatch, and it was very NeuroMatch centric. So we have a lot of things here that are could be recycled for general interest, or maybe even for next year's academy. We have the Complexity of Feedback Loops project, which is this project that we had started, and I think I was talking to Zura about it last week. So this project was based on taking some data from the one of the data sets, and this was the IBL data set, which was the International Brain Laboratory or something, and it was behavioral data from mice. So you could look at making choices and tasks. It was a very behavioral approach to an experiment, and then that data, we were going to use it to build these different cybernetic models with different levels of complexity. So you'd have a simple feedback loop, you'd have a more complex feedback loop, and so forth. So there's really something that it's very much in the spirit of reinforcement learning, but instead of reinforcement learning, our interest would be in using some sort of set of cybernetics models to characterize it. So we didn't really have a result that we could publish, but that's really not the point of these projects. The point of these projects is to get your feet wet with data and work towards some goal. That being said, this project is still open, and I'm not really sure what we should do with it. There's definitely probably something to it. It's just a question of how do we position it to go forward. And this year I know that I was a mentor for the academy, so I had two groups. Neither of them did anything close to this, but they noticed that they had some new data sets this year. So they're always coming up with new data sets and so forth. One of the other things I wanted to point out was that last year we talked about a slow NMA pod. There's nothing here, but the slow NMA pod, and this is something Jesse had talked about last year. The whole of the NeuroMatch Academy, they're doing all these different topics, and they're trying to cover it in 3 weeks. So that's really exhausting, I think, for a lot of people. And a lot of people say, well, I don't really know what's going on the first week. And so, maybe it'll make sense in the second week and third week, and maybe it won't, because you really don't have that much time to kind of figure things out. So you're going through all these topics, and it's very hard to, it's at chance whether you really get as much out of it as maybe you would like. So we have this idea of the slow pod, or I think people have had this idea, and people actually have done this in other groups, where they go through the materials and they go through it more slowly. instead of 3 weeks, they unpack it over like 8 or 10 weeks. And so I don't know, Jesse, if that's something that you wanted to revisit, or if it's something that we could use in some way.
Well, my general plans, like, I was accepted into the NeuroMatch computational neuroscience one, and there was this notice that, hey, we don't have enough, you could only do one of the two, and then I guess they opened that back up again. So I'm actually only really doing stuff with the deep learning one, and I do want to do that. As far as, was your question about what to do with the slow pod stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you wanted to revisit that at some point, like if there was value in doing a slower version of it, or taking some of the materials and recycling them in ways that would benefit people here, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think it's something to consider. I don't know currently if there's a critical mass of people wanting to do that here. I would ask people to say that if they do. I definitely think I probably will be making a more significant investment into the deep learning stuff, because I assume the deep learning things will be quite similar in their depth and breadth, and I think that would be a little more tailored to the skill set I'm developing right now. So I might be looking to do some kind of a slow pod or more auxiliary stuff with the deep learning material, because that's there. Also, I know Shruti hasn't been active in our meetings, but I've had a ongoing conversation with her every week or so. We check in. She's very interested in deep learning stuff. So Shruti, and I'm pretty sure Rashab and some other people might really, if we put some stuff out there saying, hey, we're doing a deep learning study group pre-course or slow pod afterwards, I think honestly that would be really important for the lab, because there hasn't been a lot of focus on that lately. So I think we can strategize and create some things that, around that going forward, because that, I think, is a skill set that a lot of people are interested in developing, and some people in the lab already have and are already going to be mentors. I forgot his name. Is one of them going to be a TA? We have at least one TA in the lab for that, right?
Krishna is going to be a TA for deep
Krishna,
learning.
yeah.
And I actually saw Shruti's presentation yesterday. She was also in the computational. I don't know. I knew she was doing the computational neuro one.
Cool. That's good. I didn't know. I missed that she was doing that one.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's good. So yeah, I think it's but it's also very useful. And I think I don't know if I showed this last week or the week before, but I have a resource page that HTML page that is has a lot of different resources on it now. So we have a lot of different sources of learning. So people are interested in learning about data, or learning about modeling, or anything else related to that. There are a number of different resources, like the resources from Neuromatch, of course. There are also resources from the Santa Fe Institute, and some other resources from different places that will give you some sort of background if you need it on these things.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, speaking of which, I think that's good for the NeuroMatch stuff, and we might revisit this during the deep learning period. Maybe there are other things that we need to think about adding in, and but yeah, I want to be able to curate this for people to revisit. So if people come into the lab, or people want to have some one-stop shopping for methods, or demystifying methods, that they can find it. So speaking of which, there actually is the A-Life conference was this week, and we didn't participate in this year, but A-Life 2021 was this week, and it was the one that was going to be held in Prague and it was I think the 100th anniversary of the. There was this novel RUR, which was like the robots and cybernetics, and that was the theme. And so they had this. They were going to do it in Prague, where this novel I think was written, and of course COVID hit. They still couldn't have it in Prague, so they had it virtually. So, so that was I got to see some of it offline. I didn't go to the conference, but the organization that runs A-Life, this is their YouTube channel here, A-Life 2021. So they'll be posting some of the videos on it. But one of the organization that runs the A-Life conference is ISAL. This is the International Society for Artificial Life. And they offered the summer school right before the conference started. And it's kind of short, but it has some people who are, some younger people in the field who are doing interesting work. And they're kind of going through artificial life, what it is, how do you define intelligence. So this talk by Lana, it has a number of different definitions. So she's interested in intelligence, but very broadly, like not just in humans, but in all sorts of organisms, and maybe even like inanimate objects, and considering whether those things are intelligent. So, this talk was just kind of like talking about, how do we define intelligence, taking like the AI approach. So she works at Sony in Japan, and they're doing a lot of stuff with, she's doing research on like AI, but also A-Life and how those intersect. There are also people like Emily, she does this artificial ecologies. So she works in, I think, in Avita, which is the platform where you can do digital evolution. Luis, who does digital evolution as well. And so you can get a good sense of what's going on in that field by looking at some of these materials. So this is the summer school. I'll put this link in the chat. And then they were also working on this encyclopedia. This is the International Society for Artificial Life. So, A-Life is it's one of these things. It's almost like the epistemic directories that we've talked about. Not quite the same thing, but, when you have a field like artificial life, maybe it's obscure to some people. So, how do you make it more friendly to the public? And so one way is to have these resources where, people are able to see software platforms, other resources, topical pages, subfield stubs. So here we have introductory resources, books, Introduction to Digital Evolution, and then some of the software platforms. So Avita is the digital evolution platform. MABE is like a platform where they're combining models. It's not really like the MetaBrains, but it's where where you combine 2 or 3 models to build a brain. And they have like Avita and other things. So Avita controls sort of the population level evolution, and like you might combine that with some model of the brain, and you could build an organism that way. So yeah, I'll put this link in the chat. This is the encyclopedia, and I think they're working on it. So this is just getting established. So this is something that if, in the future, they might add more things to it. And then there's this other thing that came up in the discussions called the Proteus Institute. And this is dedicated to facilitating the creation of bio-inspired AI. So this might be of interest to people in this group particularly, because I think a lot of people here are interested in this type of approach. And so this is, they have this little circle here, protean machines, which are these, I guess these are the xenobots that I don't know if we've talked about it in this group, but they're these robots that are built from, biological robots that they're able to reconfigure You also have computer-designed organisms. Then you have protean systems, cells to societies. This is the flatworms, so I think that this is heavily dependent on Mike Levin's work here. And then here's society. I think you're just putting pictures up. And then protean algorithms, which are weights to architecture. So you have this neural networks where you have the weights of the connections, and then you have these architectures. So this is the vision here, and they're working. I guess this is a working group. They have some workshops. They had a first Proteus workshop. This is actually, Josh Bongard was involved in this. Nick Cheney, the University of Vermont. Melanie Moses from New Mexico. This is I think that Vermont Complexity Group is involved in this quite heavily. So they're doing this. I think they sponsored a workshop. So Proteus is an ever-changing deity from Greek mythology. I don't think that's spelled right, but unlike Proteus, current machines and algorithms rarely change their form. Imagine machines that can constantly edit their structure to tackle new challenges. We hope to realize such protean machines by incorporating them into the shape-changing mechanisms from living systems. So this is kind of like what we were trying to maybe do with developmental AI in some ways, is you have these shape-changing mechanisms. This is sort of development. They don't call it development. But yeah, I think we should check that out as well. I haven't really looked it over that much, but anyways, that's what's going on in that world. Any comments or questions about any of that?
No, but that's all good stuff. That's, in my infinite time and whatever I would have done. Josh has a great course on, there's like a GitHub or a Reddit-based course where you could just go through and make a bunch of, virtual bots and machines and stuff, which I wanted to do, but never really had time to do. So it's cool to see that. And we're not doing anything directly with A-Life this year, but in the future, I'm sure we can do more with them.
Yeah, I think so. They're going to do. I also heard that they're doing after, I guess you can't say post-COVID because we don't know when that's going to be, but like they're planning from here on out, for future conferences, they have a hybrid sort of virtual and live conference. So like they might host it somewhere, and then they'd have the virtual component, and it would be decentralized like that. And I like that idea. I think that should be something that all conferences should try to do. I know this year's been tough trying to find the right medium for virtual conference, but I think that I think some of them have been less successful and some of them have been more successful. I think some of the AI conferences have been more successful in terms of getting it's a matter of getting content to people, but then also engaging people with the content. And that's where I think people have had, they've had problems delivering the content, some groups, because, some conferences I've heard that they've had technical difficulties, and it's been really hard, if you're using one of these platforms, conference delivery platforms, often, they'll have problems, and you'll have problems accessing the talks or whatever, but also engaging people once they're viewing the content. How do you do that? Like at a real conference, people raise their hands and they, come into sessions and their body's in the room, you can see people. But virtually, you can't do any of that. So you can raise your hand in a virtual venue, but it's harder to ask questions, maybe, or to see people in the audience. It's just kind of like you're recording into the void. And so, but I think that there are ways to fix that, and I think that's good going forward, that we have these kind of opportunities to do things virtually. It cuts down on travel, and it's, more accessible, I think, to a wider range of people. So, Okay. Let me go over some odds and ends here. I see I have. So I'm going to go back for a minute to the cognition futures stuff. So I'm going to go over some slides I have for the meeting. This is something I'm going to present during the meeting here, or during the session, but I wanted to go over the slides to get people's feedback, to whet their appetite for it. So this is an idea I have called adjacent futures. And the idea here is, it's a big idea, how the concept of what they call an adjacent possible can affect the trajectory of an academic field. In this case, cog-sci, but this will work for any academic field technically. So Max Planck, who was a physicist, he's now dead, he made the observation that scientific progress proceeds one funeral at a time. So oftentimes, luminary scientists like Einstein or someone would have a certain approach to things. They'd have like a big discovery that they made, and then they kind of stuck in that world. So like when quantum physics came along, Einstein was sort of resistant to it. And the same thing happened to a lot of people when Darwin's ideas came about, and they started to diffuse into different areas of biology. A lot of the German embryologists, for example, were sort of resistant to the ideas. And so, the way that usually science would change, at least according to Max Planck, was that people would have to die off, and you'd have new people come in, and that would be, so that sort of change was very slow and gradual. On the other hand, Stu Kaufman, who's still alive, and he does a lot of interdisciplinary research, and he made this observation, and this is basically what the adjacent possible is. So if such a tiny fraction of the potential diversity of proteins of length 100 have ever felt the sun's warmth, then there's plenty of room for human explorers to roam. And the idea there is that you have these combinatorial systems, basically, which is the generation of knowledge, the creation of knowledge, that people explore. And so the idea is that if you're exploring it in an unbiased manner, it gives you potentially a lot of different paths for discovery. But of course, people don't do that in real life. So what exactly is it that people are doing? The truth lies somewhere between these two quotes, basically. So there's this idea of serendipity in scientific discovery. And so there are different ways that serendipity can happen. And this is from a paper on this topic. This is a picture of serendipitous discovery. So the first one is that open search leads to a discovery. This is sort of a brute force approach to serendipity, because you just search the world and you find something great. That's not really something that is timely. So, people usually don't just do that. They usually, have a plan. They usually have a project that they're working on. But even then, you can find ways to find these unexpected discoveries. So one is that there's some solution you find via some sort of unexpected path. You're doing work and you find some, unexpected path, and you take it, and that's your great discovery. Okay, that's one way. Also, that research in field X leads to a discovery in field Y. So, in cognitive science, you might have some research in, say, machine learning or in computer science, and it's there's some big discovery there, and it kind of comes into cognitive science, and it allows you to make advances in the field without having to do any sort of searching yourself. And this, requires you to have this adjacency to the field. So this is where this adjacent possible idea comes in. So this is like kind of a diagram of some of this. This is pretty theoretical, but this is the idea. So there's this possibility space, which is this large combinatorial space with discrete possibilities, and these are these squares. The idea is you have these neighborhoods. So this white square here is where I'm standing now. And say I want to explore my neighboring squares for ideas or just kind of doing experiments, and I end up going in certain directions. So we can't know where the great discovery is going to lie. Most of the time, academic fields don't explore this adjacency, but trajectories have a contingency. So in other words, like all these squares around it, I could explore all these squares. And if it were, sort of a equiprobable thing, or it was a random thing, I could just explore each of these squares. But I can't really do that because, academic activity precludes that. So I can only pick one or two trajectories and go that way. But what happens when I do that is I tend to lock myself into a certain trajectory. So I explore, say, the square up here at the top, then that leads me to a new set of possibilities, and so on. But then I end up with this path, and so you can see how different paths are taken through, the world, and how maybe some of these unleash hidden, sort of creativity that exists. So you get this combinatorial creativity. You go from one thing to the next, and it allows you to maybe find things that allow you to find, these discoveries. But there are a couple things that you have to take into account. So sometimes it's, that you can't take all paths, but you also have things like propagation speed. So how fast do you explore adjacent ideas? So, if there are a lot of things happening in your adjacent fields, you might start incorporating stuff. But that's not always the case. Sometimes things lie dormant in neighboring fields for a very long time before people adopt them. So that's what I mean by propagation speed. The other are parallel trajectories, where you go and you explore and you find this path, and then maybe, in the field, people have done this in common, sort of, through the literature, and then there's this bifurcation where people take different paths, and they say, well, there's some group of people who say, no, this path is better, and this other group of people who say, no, this other path is better. And so you end up with these divergent paths, which is actually maybe good for this sort of adjacent discovery, because it allows you to explore more of the possibility space, but we don't know. But to map this back onto some sort of reality, we can look at co-citation networks. And people have taken these networks, and these are networks of papers that get cited together. So, in this case, you have a bunch of papers that are cited. One paper will cite 40 things, and then they're connected in this network. Okay, so we're trying to figure out how to analyze these networks, and one way to do it is to find communities. So you can find a community within the network, which is just like a group of nodes that sort of have a tight connectivity to one another. And so in this paper here, they find these communities and co-citation networks. They're able to define different fields by using this technique. So they're able to find cybernetics as a community within this network. And so, there's one way to do this. You can look at co-citations, you can find communities, but this also tells you something about how much of the adjacent possible that these authors in the field have explored. There's this sort of defined community, but there are also these links that go out into different other places. And so you can kind of, we're not quite there yet in terms of a rigorous analysis, but you can see how this works. You have this community of citations, this tight connectivity of citations, but you're also citing things from outside. And that's where some of these discoveries might come from citing things outside that community. And so over time, it actually shifts this community in different ways. So adjacency is an interaction between adjacent fields. A citation link, a conversation between colleagues in, say, different non-adjacent fields. So this is what we mean by adjacency. And these ideas only need to be adjacent in some way for potential ideas to be explored. So, you just need to have those conversations between cog-sci and chemistry, or you need to have people reading the same literature in the case of cog-sci and computer science. And you can make these adjacent links. So then, there are these strategies, then going back to our grid here, where we have blocking and unblocking adjacent discovery. So we start with this initial condition where we're in the middle of this grid, and we're this white square here. So we look around us and we say, what paths are available to discovery? And we see these red squares, which are basically blocked off. So these are avenues which we won't be exploring. And there are reasons why we won't be doing that. Some of these include sort of this epistemic bias against the pathway. So it's an idea you're not familiar with or you don't like. You don't think it'll work. There's other paths that involve a lack of training to pursue. So if this is something like it's an advanced chemistry assay, you probably won't be using it for cognitive science unless you can hire someone who knows this technique and you have the equipment. And so there are a lot of barriers to pursuing this. Say it's something for neurochemistry, and you really need to have everything built in. You need to have some sort of big time collaboration or higher technical expertise. So you don't take that path. And then you have this other path that's blocked off, and this is represents the potential is not salient to researchers. So in other words, it's something that isn't really in people's attentional zone. It may not be experimentally tractable. So say you're an experimentalist and you say, well, this isn't experimentally tractable, I don't want to do it. Or it's some idea that, again, it goes back to the ideas, or it's some approach that you just can't get your head around. So it's just not something you're going to do. So these are just ways that people don't explore these adjacent areas. But now this allows you to see where people will explore. And so these open squares are where people will explore. And these are these constrained trajectories. We can see them taking a trajectory through this possibility space, but they do it in a constrained way. And then this is basically why, because you have these block paths either immediately adjacent or adjacent, second or third order adjacent, that don't allow you to explore them. And so this is why you take these certain paths. At least this is the hypothesis. We need to, find data and find more information about the history of the field to really kind of confirm this. But where else might this lead? This might also lead to a phylogenetic approach. So in this talk presented at the the Cultural Evolution Society, we talked about using phylogenetic approaches to look at trajectories of ideas. And so this is one of the examples here where we have this academic field that's evolving over, I guess, weeks. Maybe the time scale is a bit off, but you get these branches that come off of what we'll call an academic field. And it's just basically papers being published or ideas being put forth. And there are these branching events that come out. And you can see that sometimes the branching events lead nowhere. So these are papers that really aren't cited or influence anything. Then you have papers that kind of reach a plateau, so they get cited a lot. They become sort of a consensus view for a while. And then you have these combinatorial events where, say, a consensus view is then influenced by a later paper. And so you have these events going over time. And this diagram is just kind of showing how this process might work. Ideas die off, ideas recombine, and ideas branch off into new ideas. And you end up with these different levels of consensus over time that, it might be one consensus, it might be multiple. They might merge together, or they might just go away. It really, this is the sort of the representation of it. So that's the idea here. So that's all I had. I don't know how many. That's probably about 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, that was good. I like this a lot, and I'm making notes about a lot of things here for the overall thing. I think this is a really, really nice piece to have, and I'm thinking about, I'm pretty impressed with this. And I'm not sure if Avery has any comments about it, but I think that'll be a really good conversation piece to have in what we're doing. And also, I kind of wanted to ask before I forget, and this isn't a direct response, but you made some presentations in the last 2 weeks or so, Bradly, and I don't remember the specific topics, and I don't know if that was a revision of one or a brand new one from the past ones that you did. Could you say what the last they were in the past? Because I'm trying to map out who's going to be saying what and when. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a great thing to have in the lineup. And I'm just trying to think how should we have these arranged at this point.
What do you mean the other ones? I'm not.
like you made a presentation in the past in like the previous weeks that were about similar like things that could potentially fit in as a presentation at the event, but I didn't know if they were. I don't remember the details, mostly because I was traveling.
Yeah.
So I can go back and look at them.
Yeah,
also.
These were in the lab meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there may have been some things. I need to go back. I'll get them for you maybe tonight. Yeah, there was a paper that I saw. It was there was a paper I reviewed, the rise and fall of academic fields or something like that.
Okay.
So that was, I think, 2 weeks ago. That was actually something from like the Networks conference that I found. And that might be over people's heads in terms of the method. But it's basically, the idea I think is interesting. And I don't know what I said last week. Yeah, I'll have to go through and look.
Yeah, I was like very much not. Last week I was barely there, so
yeah.
That's fine. No, as far as this one, no, I think this is a really. I think this is really appropriate, especially for cognitive science, which is I'm a little bit curious who's going to show up and how, like, who's going to be a purist or not. I think we probably won't attract the most puristy of people who come to the event, but at the same time, like, there'll be cognitive science is so not uniform. I'm really curious to see how people. I'm starting to envision how the event can basically, like why I say this is a great conversation piece, because I think you can find a lot of. We could have like probably 20 to 30, depending on who shows up, and even just with me and you, but depending on who shows up, you could probably easily have 20 to 30-minute discussion about what have been and what will be the issues affecting that which constrains the path of development, whether it's epistemologically or funding. There's a whole thing about funding and how we probably won't get into this there, but a major thing that has happened in let's say other discussions that I've been in, without to be very anonymous, other discussions that I've been in this topical space. There's a lot of politics, like just personal politics and personal pettiness or weirdly mismatched skill sets about academic, or people have very strong interpersonal preferences that affect their research outputs and their mentoring and everything else. And I don't want to turn this into a gossip session at all, but just like if there's keeping ways to think about what actually in real terms is affecting those developmental things, and how to, I think a major theme that we can have for our event as a whole will be, and it's kind of what I tried to write in the bio, the description, is how do we understand the major trajectories at play, and then what are ideas and strategies or ways to be aware of that which kind of is in the shadow or is not the mainstream version of it, just to kind of see where are the areas that the fruit has been neglected or couldn't be reached, or what I'll find a much more concise and snappy way to say it, but I think we can have like a theme of the event or like a subtitle or something that says like, how do we find, I don't know, a much snappier way of saying that the areas where the fruit hasn't been harvested, and why haven't we been able to see that, and what are the potential areas for growth and so on. And I'm sure you have a lot of people come and say, well, we're limited experimentally by these factors and these funding things and these dominant paradigms and so on. And that's fine. I think that will be the shape of the discussion that happens mostly. And I think I'm okay with that if it goes that way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any opinions about that. But.
Yeah, I think that's Yeah, it looks like we have a maybe hopefully a diverse group of people from different areas.
I, I think it will be better to have. I think our approach will be good as sort of like it almost feels like quite like an informatics point of view, or like a not. I think we're coming here not as experts in arbiters of cognitive science, but more mappers. I think I'm going to insert a presentation on the frontier map, specifically, like between a generic frontier map, and then kind of explaining. I'll do some intro that involves the frontier map concept, how it came up through CSV or epistemological directories. Like, and that'll be like kind of an intro thing, background, and then say, oh, cognitive futures is part of that, and this is kind of related to that whole. This is how this discussion panel came about. So that'll kind of be an overview. I think that'll kind of be one of the first things we talk about, and then it would be really great to go into basically this presentation or something like that as a higher level overview of thinking about different things, and then we can hit some specifics like I don't know if Anusha's doing anything with developmental stuff right now. I'm guessing not, because she's going to have some stuff to deal with. I don't know what Erin's going to do. Avery can pretty much have free reign of talking either about their specific interests, which I think would be really cool if they want to talk about their actual interests, or I'm also considering. And I'm not an expert in this, but I think it'd be really cool maybe to have a segment, even if it's like 7 minutes, which is not much, but like reviewing a paper or two about neurodivergence in cognitive science and how a lot of cognitive science or psychology may be slanted towards neurotypical activity and I'm sure there's quite a lot of understanding about that in cognitive science because what we do, but like just kind of where are we now perspective in terms of how is cognitive science adapting to much greater understanding of neurodivergent behaviors and how's that the kind of a progressive, is it being progressive or not? And then oh, go ahead.
I think, like, I definitely relate. I definitely find the epistemic directory sort of how do you optimize interdisciplinary learning to be really relevant for my research interests as well as what I would want to talk about. And even related to the neurodivergence topic, I think that in a lot of ways, I'm not sure how much there is out there, but I've seen people talk about it, how like neurodivergent perspectives oftentimes provide novel solutions, and I think especially interdisciplinary ones or unexplored options, and I think that'd be interesting to tie into what Bradly's talking about. My interests, partly because and neurodivergent, are fairly interdisciplinary in a way that seeks to like optimize the sort of searching of unfrequently explored but high yield options, and I think I definitely will think about what Bradly is doing while I do research. I'm still kind of debating like what breadth or what kind of what specific topic between the two that Jesse mentioned between the neurodivergence and my particular kind of. I think I'm likely to do both, but it depends on what I get done next few days. But yeah, I think I definitely try to tie it in. I think that'd be interesting timing wise to go after Bradly too.
What I would suggest is I really encourage you to do something specific to your specific interests, and I don't care if it's 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is hardly anything. But I would think that would be I really encourage you to do that, I think it'd be great for you to do that, even if it's not the most refined thing, but just kind of just putting a very simple something together to talk about that would be a really big addition. It would help us out. I think it'd be really good for you too. But that's going to mostly be on you. I can talk to you about that for sure. I'm also, I think I think we're definitely going to put something in about the neurodivergent stuff as well, but that I mean, honestly, that's something I could probably collaborate. If Angela has any time, she might be a really good resource for that, actually. Maybe Erin would too. Anusha, if she can make it work. I think the neurodivergent stuff would be a collective enough effort, but we could do it. But I would encourage you to focus on your personal stuff and just, because you have a lot of overlapping ideas, but also like thinking about, if anything, just without, you don't need to go into specific details necessarily for your technical or methodological stuff if you don't want to, but just thinking about the question that that inspire you and the things you're looking to answer, and I think framing those in an interesting way, and then maybe a little bit of what you're looking at in between. I think that would be really big and good.
Yeah, I think that's my current default. If I had more time to spend out with other stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I would love it if everybody in the lab kind of did like a little like presentation like that. But I think, to be realistic at this point, it's probably just going to be you and me doing that, and Bradley's kind of, very generously filling in a lot of gaps about sort of intellectual framing of things with these ideas and presentations. So like that's awesome. And we've done a lot of stuff with epistemological directories for a long time, so those can fill in a lot of things too. But I feel like it's probably going to be, as much as I can help you do what you want to do with your thing, your personal. I really like to do that, especially because, I think that'd be really key. And just to kind of go over what my map right now, like introduction, frontier map stuff. I may tie in the state-of-the-art AI stuff that I'm working with in there directly, or like maybe just a little bit and come back later with a computational focus on computational neuroscience, because that's what it is. And then I like Bradley's talk about, what was it called? Adjacency?
Adjacent futures.
Okay.
What the title was, yeah.
Adjacent futures, and then I feel like we could have a lot of like, it's sort of the concept, the coding content conclusion inverse triangle. So we kind of start with the broad things and get down to some specific topics, knock them out, do a nice little concluding session or a panel, and then break the panel off into open questions and whatever for the rest of our time. I think that's how it's going to flow. And I think that'll be, because I think it's a good idea to keep like the main question time at the end. Maybe like one. Does anybody have one like initial question to ask at most? But just to keep it moving, and then we can have a big, ongoing, roaring discussion. And then having some planted, questions in that discussion. I think we can even just start generating a question. I'm going to start soliciting everybody here, for questions they want to answer, because, and even on Twitter, this would be a great way to advertise. So what are some questions about, that's actually really key. Write that down.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing I recommend is that we'll have like someone monitoring the chat. Like, so I don't know who, well, I mean, we can do that, we can share the duties, but like just kind of make sure that the chat is being monitored for questions. And I've seen a lot of events where there will be like, a lot of questions in the chat as people are going through, because people will have ideas that kind of pop into their head and then they want to put them down. So, you might want to kind of think about how to curate some of those, or, I mean, you don't have to just do it on the fly, I guess, but, just think about how, if you're doing this, you want to distill the questions in the chat, because sometimes they'll be just like kind of open-ended things, and sometimes there'll be 3 or 4 questions on the same thing. So like, we want to make, if we can take things from the chat and bring them into the
Yeah,
meeting.
and I'm not quite familiar with Zoom because I think if you're a host, you can give, like, for some of the questions, I think that they'll probably be very field domain knowledge specific, and we won't have that. So if there's a way to give, like, I want to give the mic to somebody and say, hey, do you want to fully elaborate on this kind of a thing? And I think you can do that in Zoom, right? Like, there's a way to...
Yeah, I thought we were going to do it in Jitsi, but...
Oh, they put a Zoom link out on that.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that. I mean, it depends. It depends on how we know. Yeah, it's another issue. Where do we want to host? Do we want to go through Zoom or Jitsi? Because we don't have to use the link.
Jitsi like a max of like 30 or something?
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know.
Because, I mean, I'm fine with Jitsi, but...
Yeah. I don't think we'll have 30 people.
Yeah, I feel more robust now, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can use Zoom. All we have to do is figure this out by the time we kind of send out. I want to send out an email, maybe at the end of the weekend, about the sort of the details of the meeting and make sure that we have everything in order. Like, I know the meeting place, sometimes it's... Yeah, I don't know if they're hosting it off of the conference or what, too. So Zoom has some limitations unless you have, like, the paid version. But I don't know which one we want to use for that. But we'll have to figure out the link, like decide on a link.
I'm excited now that I thought about asking people on Twitter about...
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
That'd be a really good thing to do. Yeah, and that way we can involve people who won't be there. Hey, on Twitter, prior to the event, we put some questions out, and we had, Charlotte. I'm sure Charlotte would have some question for us. You could say, Charlotte from UCL asks this question, so that would be cool. Yeah, this is good. I feel good about this, and I apologize for being kind of delayed and so much, and I honestly feel a little bit bad because I think my busyness has not kept everybody as involved as they could have been. But this weekend, I have my notes and my map, and I feel pretty good about things now, and I have to say thank you so much, Bradley, for keeping things together. That's a huge. It shouldn't be understated that you kept things together while I've been away. So thank you. But I think that's it. Like, even just what we have here, like, that's like 10 minutes. Even if like Avery's thing is 7 minutes, that's like 30 minutes already. With like, that's like 45 minutes of like gaps and spacing and timing already. And we could easily have 2, 3, 4 more presentations that aren't, everything we have right now is pretty much already there. So yeah, not thinking about the timing of things, it's like 90 minutes seems like a long time, but then it's like we're already like 100% booked for half of the time period. Like there's gonna be no way to not spend like basically 50 minutes already on the things we have here. No less the neurodivergent stuff, no less working with Erin on anything, no less. I still kind of want to see if Anusha wants to go in on it a little bit with some kind of a developmental psychology approach to stuff, because I think there's stuff there if we could just refine it into something. But I mean, that's already like, that's basically going into the full hour, and we're gonna, we at least, I think at the very least we want to have like 15, if not 20 minutes for open discussion, because we're a discussion group,
Yeah.
But like, even honestly, even if we only have 50 minutes of program material and the rest is discussion or guided discussion, I don't think that's going to be a problem. Like, I think that'll be satisfying for everybody. Even if for some reason we have to cut it off early, like we only use like 80 minutes or 70 minutes, that's fine. I think, just for managing expectations, I think all of that's, do you think that's reasonable?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. And, we can probably go over if I don't think they're going to cut us off. But we'll see. Yeah. Because I think we're at the end of the day on Wednesday. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I suddenly feel like a little bit better about everything right now because it was a little bit like, oof, what am I going to do? But we have a lot of things there. So yeah, let me before I go fully in, or is there anything else you want to say about your presentation specifically? Because I know we kind of did a big tangent from it. But I think that adjacent futures is a very good piece. Anything else that you or Avery wanted to say about that?
No.
Okay. Was there anything else specifically about the event? I've done a lot of talking about it, but anything that you want to say?
I don't. I'm fine. Avery?
Yeah. Do you have any questions, Avery?
Not off the top of my head right now. If I do, I'll ask you later.
Yeah, I've been talking to you pretty much any time this weekend specifically about your stuff. And we kind of have had that, but just putting it into a presentation won't be that hard, but it can be a little bit. So we can do that whenever. But yeah, I'm going to follow up with Erin and Anusha later. Anusha, I'm not quite. Anusha's the biggest question mark in the sense of I think she's very close, and then I'm not sure what to say. So I don't want to speak for her at all. But I'll follow up with her later today specifically. But yeah, so frontier maps, adjacent futures, and something else here that I wrote. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll start I don't know if it should be in Slack. Or I might make it just a shared document of the outline of things.
Yeah.
Just so we have a plan for it and understand. I imagine I'll probably. I mean, I don't know how you want to divide MC stuff. I'm fine with being you have more experience with it.
Yeah.
So, but I guess if one of us is hosting a talk, the other could sort of MC it in general, or however that's working, because I won't be able to do.
Right.
I'll be talking sometimes, and you'll be talking sometimes. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can just share the duties. I think if we now understand the flow of it, I think we can share the document and we can understand the flow of things, and so we'll just split the duties.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, and that's 4 days away. So is it Wednesday?
Wednesday, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go.
All right.
I think that might be the discussion about that for today. This is anything else people want to say about it. With discussions occurring the rest of today outside of the people.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's yeah. So it looks like Angela and Erin have left us, and we'll finish up with some papers. I did want to talk about this. Well, I don't think I have anything to update on the submissions document, so we'll leave that aside for this week. Why don't we just get right into papers then? So there are a couple things here I wanted to talk about. The first is a conversation on Twitter. It was actually a thread by Mike Levin, and he asked the question, looking for simple examples of artificial neural networks or any network that can perform a homeostatic cycle. What's a hopefully simple, minimal network model that can keep a parameter within acceptable range despite external perturbations, some sort of homeostat? So you got a bunch of responses, and I collected them here in this document. I don't name the people, but this is the question, and then the answers are indented. So the first is there a simple example of ANNs that express a homeostatic cycle? And the answers ranged from a cycle GANs during training phase. So this is a generative adversarial network, which has cycles in it. During the training phase, it does this sort of thing, maybe. Also, feedback loops implemented as an artificial neural network. So you definitely have that neural network approach, but you also have what they call a PID controller. And so last week, actually, I know Jesse wasn't here for this, but I presented a paper on PID controllers versus Bayesianism. It's really kind of an interesting paper. We talked about the sort of potential debate between Bayesians and cyberneticists, which was kind of something we kind of made up for the purposes of a debate. But this is actually something we talked about, and I think this is actually something someone pointed out, that the PID controller, which is a proportional integrative indifference controller, so this is what it does with an input. And this is something from engineering that has been used for many years. It kind of derives from cybernetics. So it's an interesting approach, and I don't know what if there are any more answers. I haven't checked the thread, but the second one is, does a PID controller emerge from a collective of identical subunits? And so the answers to that were a neural network with a control loop quality, minimal ANN that can act like a homeostat, keep parameter values within an acceptable range. So those are things, again, going back to artificial neural networks. Recurrent neural network without chaos. So they actually have like neural networks where you can have what they call chaos, which is a physical concept, which is where you have this far from equilibrium behavior. But this is without chaos. And then a couple of people pointed to the classics of like the pole balancing task, which is where you have a pole on a cart, and you move the cart back and forth on a track, and the idea is to keep the pole upright. So you have to move the cart back and forth along this track. As you move it in one direction, the pole will fall, and then you move it in the opposite direction to correct for that fall. And so the pole will balance more or less in an equilibrium. And so you can use a pole balancing task. This is a common benchmark for approaches like neuroevolution and other programming tasks. There's also this paper, and I have it in the folder here, it takes 2 neurons to ride a bicycle. So they used representations of 2 neurons to ride a bicycle to control the sort of the balance, keeping yourself on top of a bicycle. So those are interesting approaches. And then someone mentioned the universe as a neural network. And so that's this idea of learning equilibria. What are the linkages, edges, connections, synapses, etc.? So in these networks, you have nodes and you have edges, and the edges are the linkages. So it's between the 2 units that are useful for emergence of homeostatic behavior. So people mentioned Maxwell's governor, which is the very classic one that was brought up in a lot of the cybernetics literature. These are single-piece thermostats that the parts are heterogeneous. Also, you can invert a neural network, hold their weights fixed, and optimize real-world inputs. I don't exactly know where they were going with that, but finally, the last question is, how do a number of tiny homeostats link together to form a tissue? Homeostasis towards a common set point. So in other words, this is homeostasis. There were answers like universal biomolecular integral feedback controller, which is a mouthful, for robust perfect adaptation. Inhibitory plasticity balances excitation and inhibition. So this is in the brain where you have these different modes of control by neurons, either excitatory or inhibitory. So neural circuits are a bunch of neurons interconnected doing these different types of it's either exciting, it's positive feedback maybe, or inhibition, which is negative feedback, and then they balance each other out in a certain way. And this is how plasticity is controlled, for example. And someone brought up Daisy World as being a minimal homeostat. So Daisy World is where you have a model of the planet. And the idea is that you have a planet, say, that's full of daisies. And you have the surface of the planet is covered with daisies of different colors. And the different colors have a certain reflectance of light. And so the idea is that if you have like a black box, a black surface of a planet, it will, you'll have this sort of runaway greenhouse effect. But with different, colored daisies, you can have, or different coverage of daisies, you can have this homeostatic control where there's a certain amount of what they call albedo, there's a certain amount of heating and cooling that, there's this regulatory aspect that makes the planet habitable or not. And so this is what there's this. You can look up Daisy World for more about that. But there's also this self-steering gear, which is the link here, which is a type of mechanism that people use to characterize homeostasis. They're reservoir computing with allostatic nodes. Each node adjusts weights based on target. So someone brought up allostatic control. And then Conrad Lorenz, who was a behavioral ecologist, he brought up this idea, he used this idea often of a toilet tank float ball, which is where when you, inside the tank of your toilet, there's a ball that keeps the water level, kind of tracks with the water level, so wherever the float ball is, your water level rises. So it's a way of regulating the flow of water. So those are all the different answers to the questions, and I thought those are really interesting responses. We also have papers in this folder. So that was the original question. Their papers, this paper, the Universal Biomolecular Integral Feedback Controller. This is one of the papers. There's this other paper, Emergent Quantumness in Neural Networks. There's this third paper, It Takes Two Neurons to Ride a Bicycle. So this was the one where they were talking about a very minimal model. And this is actually a reinforcement learning approach where they have this virtual bicycle and they're able to control it using a minimal model. And then there's this final one, a recurrent neural network without chaos. So all those are in this folder here. I'll put it in the chat. And you can check it out for yourself. And if you want to talk about it more in the Slack, I'd be happy to talk about it because I think it's an interesting topic. Mike Levin always comes up with these really interesting topics. So there's this numerosity in human culture. So this was I don't know if I have the original. Okay, this is the original paper. What is this? Okay, so this is the paper here, which is the cultural origins of symbolic number. So the idea here is that people have argued about like this idea of numerosity. And so, they think, well, is math like a cultural universal, or is it something that is like, specific to different cultures? What level of sort of mathematical commonality is there amongst cultures? And so in this paper, they talk about the cultural origins of symbolic numbers. So they talk about sort of the wide diversity of symbol systems in human cultures. So the abstract is, it is popular in psychology to hypothesize that representations of exact number are innately determined. In particular, that biology has endowed humans with a system for manipulating quantities which forms the primary representational substrate for our numerical mathematical concepts. So this is like, do we have this sort of innate mathematics, or is it something that we come up with as representations based on culture, and then we're representing something else in the world? So like, for example, in non-human primates, we know that they have some forms of numerosity, like they know that there's certain amount, they can count like certain quantities, they can differentiate between certain quantities. And so, there's this thing that, we assume that non-human primates don't have the symbolic richness of humans. So we know that, it isn't necessarily a symbolic thing, but the question is like advanced concepts, they're obviously symbolic. Do these things hold together across cultures? While this perspective has been important for advancing empirical work in animal and child cognition, here we examine 6 natural predictions of strong numeric nativism from a multidisciplinary perspective. So they find each to be at odds with evidence from anthropology and developmental science. In particular, the history of numbers. The history of number reveals characteristics that are inconsistent with biological determinism of numeric concepts, including of lack of number systems across some human groups, and a remarkable variability in the form of numerical systems that do emerge. Instead, this literature highlights the importance of economic and social factors in constructing fundamentally new cognitive systems to achieve culturally specific goals. So they go through some of the evidence here. They talk about precise discernment of small numerosities, known as subitizing, with a range of roughly 1 to 4, and an approximate ratio-sensitive discrimination ability that obey Weber's law for larger numerosities, both of which can be derived from information processing considerations. So this is something that you see in a lot of animals across, the tree of life. So, and you also see it in very young children who haven't acquired culture yet. So this is stuff that, they're trying to work. They're kind of like trying to test this idea. We consider theories of numerical cognition to advance biologically deterministic or nativist arguments when they posit that A, innate quantity mechanisms scale up, essentially on their own, to produce a large exact symbolic number in perhaps mathematics. And then B, there are innate mechanisms of representation that are isomorphic to the mathematical and logical foundations of number. So I think what they do here is they go through different cultures and they find evidence that suggests that this, they have different cultures have different ways of representing these things. And so I'm trying to find some examples of this. So tasks requiring counting cannot be solved by native Paraha people, and only words which express quantity can be shown to mean relative, not exact quantity. For example, when people in this culture were asked to count 10 physical objects in ascending order from 1 to 10, they appeared to use a one-to-many count system. That is, participants labeled sets of sizes 1 as hoi, sets of size 2 as hoi, and all other sets as bagiso. However, when counting down, it was apparent that the terms were actually relative and approximate quantifiers rather than exact numerical terms. So, this is where they're kind of using a different strategy to count, to have a number system that's maybe relative rather than like on a number line like we're used to and when we learn in math class when we're children. I think this is interesting with respect to the contextual geometric structures, because we actually do allow for this sort of representational flexibility. I think that would be a strength of that approach, and maybe I think something we can explore later. But I think there's this, definitely, you can learn a lot from this paper in terms of how different cultures are representing things. And definitely I think if in the AI context, there's something to be learned from this, because we assume in sort of this general intelligence approach or general AI approach that there's a sort of this innate mathematics that is sort of the best way to do it, or that we should replicate. In fact, there are a number of ways in which you can get to counting and comparing and things like that. So I think this is, I wanted to go to this other paper though, and this is The Child as Hacker, and this is actually Josh Tenenbaum is on this. So this is something that it's kind of a complement to the other paper, and the abstract reads, "The scope of human learning and development poses a radical challenge for cognitive science. We propose that developmental theories can address this challenge by adopting perspectives from computer science. Many of our best models treat learning as analogous to computer programming because symbolic programs provide the most compelling account of sophisticated mental representations. We specifically propose that children's learning is analogous to a particular style of programming called hacking, making code better along many dimensions through an open-ended set of goals and activities. By contrast to existing theories, which depend primarily on local search and simple metrics, This view highlights the many features of good mental representations and the multiple complementary processes children use to create them. So this is sort of comparing childlike learning with hacking, or I should say exploratory learning, because children are trying to explore the world, learn culture and things like that, and put them into a framework. So this is, they kind of make the analogy with hacking, and so this is, I think, a good complement to this paper, and I'll put the link in the chat here.
Yeah, the childless hacker one has come up, obviously, generally interested in Josh Tinnerbaum's work, so it's good to see it come from the lab here again. I've been meaning to kind of go over it more. But it's a very interesting thing to think about, and in terms of quite a bit of the, when Josh has done the panels at like NeuroIPS with Gary Marcus and stuff about the future and how to make AI more robust, this paper comes up a lot, so it's definitely something good to review before our event next week.
Yeah, I think it would be a good thing to at least talk about. Yeah. And so finally I wanted to get, I wanted to make another paper. What would I pick? Why don't we look at this one? I've been sitting on this for a while. This is a little bit deep, and this is a behavioral and brain sciences paper, so it has a lot of commentary afterwards. Like I said, this is actually something maybe we should talk about. Well, we should bring it up in the Trajectories session, because this is actually a good source of data for. In fact, I might put it into my talk as a slide, as a way to kind of get a handle on some of these debates. Like, you start off with a topic, and then you have this argument, and then you get into these like open peer commentaries where people will come up with different things that will branch off in 1,000 different directions. And so this just brings together a lot of literature, is what eventually happens. You can see every note has like a set of references. And so this is potentially this is 37 pages. This is potentially a lot of different trajectories kind of sitting there. And it's hard to know, I'll just kind of point to it. But we can talk about that. I think that's a good way to think about trajectories too. This is one strategy to kind of analyze them if people are interested. But in terms of this paper, this is the command neuron concept. And this is behavioral. This is 1978, so this is a long time ago. This was over 40 years ago. So the notion of the command cell has been highly influential in invertebrate neurobiology. So now we're talking about insect brains, crustaceans, and other organisms like that. So they have these different type of nervous systems where they have cells that are dedicated to a certain thing. So they have specific cells that develop as specific cells, and they control specific things in the organism, as opposed to the human brain where cells can be, they can be of a class, of a type, and then they work collectively, or any one cell can be encode any sort of information that class would encode. So it's a different type of nervous system. Okay, so this has been highly influential in invertebrate neurobiology, and related notions have been increasingly used in research on the vertebrate nervous system. The term command neuron implies that the neuron has some critical function in the generation of normally occurring behavior. So this is it basically, without that neuron there, it couldn't do this behavior. Nevertheless, most authors either explicitly or implicitly use a strictly operational definition, independent of considerations of normal behavioral function. That is, command neurons are often defined as neurons which, when stimulated by the experimenter, invoke some behavioral response. Even when utilizing such an operational definition, investigators frequently differ on what they consider to be the exact characteristics that a neuron must have or not have to be considered a command cell. A few authors appear to treat command neurons in relation to normal function, but a precise behaviorally relevant definition has not been specified. Because of this ambiguity in the definition of these type of neurons, the term can refer to a wide variety of neurons, which may play divergent behavioral roles. So labeling a cell as a command neuron may interfere with the process of discovering complex causal determinants of behavior, even in a nervous system like an invertebrate species, where you don't have as many neurons generally as, say, like the human brain or some vertebrate brain. Nevertheless, the notion that individual cells are responsible for certain behaviors is highly appealing, and an attempt to define the command neuron rigorously could be worthwhile. So they suggest that a command neuron be defined in 2 ways, or actually in 3 ways, by establishing the response pattern of the putative command neuron during presentation of a given stimulus and execution of the behavior, to removing the neuron and showing that the response is no longer elicited by the stimulus. This is what they call the necessary condition. So is it necessary? And 3, firing the neuron in its normal pattern and showing that complete behavioral response occurs. This is the sufficient condition. So necessary and sufficient mean that, is this necessary for the causal thing to happen, or is this sufficient by itself for the causal thing to happen? If it's necessary and sufficient, that means it's not only implicated in that thing, but it's the only way that could happen. So that's a strong causality. If it's necessary but not sufficient, then that means that there are other mechanisms that compete for that. So it's part of a larger sort of causal framework. And then if it's neither necessary nor sufficient, we're looking at a false positive and we should look somewhere else. So in some cases, groups of neurons, when treated as a whole, may satisfy necessity and sufficiency criteria for a given behavior, even though individual neurons of the group fail to meet the criteria. We suggest that such a group may be termed a command system for the behavior in question. Individual neurons in the command system can be termed command elements if, when fired in their normally occurring pattern, they elicit a part of the behavior, or modulatory elements, if they do not in isolation elicit any response, but alter the behavior produced of other elements in the command system. So this is relevant to the stuff that we've been doing on developmental Bradenburg vehicles, in the sense that we have these growing neural networks that we want to know what the different neurons do. And in Bradenburg vehicles, we know that, like, we have these hardwired nervous systems that where, when depending on how they're wired up, they do certain things. They can move backwards and forwards. They can elicit these quasi sort of emotional behaviors. And so I think, there's an analysis to be had of Bradenburg vehicles, and especially developmental Bradenburg vehicles, where you're adding in and removing neurons from the topology. And so I don't know, we'll probably revisit this soon, but that's, I think, a good way to understand some of the roles of neurons, and especially when you're, when you have a system like a toy model like the Bradenburg vehicle. If you can say, if we add this neuron, this behavior is enabled, or if we take this neuron out, this behavior collapses. It gives us, I think, a better idea of how we can generate artificial behaviors, and especially developmentally, where you're adding neurons and sometimes taking away connections at different stages in development. So we have I didn't bring the timeline or the sort of the schema of development that we have in I think it was the continual embodied learning paper, and we need to turn back to that, by the way. But that sort of diagram in the paper where we discuss, you have early development, and then you have the critical period, and then you have this later part of development where you have developmental freedom. All those things, I think, can be improved by this type of analysis, where you're looking for a sort of causality in a nervous system. In a small nervous system, it works well because you can do this analysis. It's tractable. But I think that's where this comes into play. And I put the link to the folder in here, so that's where that paper is. Okay. So are there any questions on any of that? Any reflections?
No questions, but I think these are good papers to be thinking about. So thanks for sharing them. I'm going to have to head out at the moment. I guess we're kind of already at the time anyway. But,
Yeah.
That's all.
The neuron paper looks really interesting. I'll probably look at it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. And let me you can let us know in Slack what you think about it. All right. Well, thanks for attending the meeting, and look forward to Wednesday's event. We'll be on Slack talking about this. So hope for a good session.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape, and I think there's a little more things to flesh out over the weekend. But I think these are going to turn out well. And again, thanks for kind of managing all of this stuff. And yeah, as a note, I have to sign up with our free pass, and Avery needs to sign up as well. So I'll try to get the emails to us both soon. Or if you see them, Bradley, send them our way again. Whatever happens first is great.
Okay.
But I think we're in good shape, and thanks everybody for showing up, and thanks to the people who aren't here and talk to us in Slack or elsewhere.